So thank you everyone for joining us. This is my final presentation of the day, which is exciting, but hopefully you can enjoy the rest of this week. I am Grace Maxon-Clarke, Associate Dean of Students, and I'm here to talk a little bit about out-of-class notices. And so prior to my time in the Dean of Students office, I didn't actually know much about out-of-class notices other than I knew my students I would get notified that they were out of class, or I would encourage them to get an out-of-class notice. But I've learned a lot over the last year and a half in this new role. And so I wanted to share what I've learned with you all and answer any questions that you might have. All right. So what is an out-of-class notice? So according to the university standards and policies on class attendance, if a student is absent from a class for a period of 3 or more consecutive class days, for extenuating circumstances, they have to contact our office with supportive documentation, and we'll send out a notification. Now, this notification is not an excuse. We tell the students that up front, and I'll show you an example in a moment. And it does not obligate the faculty member in any way. So really, it's just a communication tool, and it's something that we do to kind of help the faculty know that the student's experience or circumstance has been vetted through our office. I consider it like a blue check verified, that the student is going through something or will need to be away for a good reason. And that the student hopefully will be in contact with you on their next steps and what they're going to miss. So what are extenuating circumstances? So these are things that we do ask for documentation on. So it could be a hospitalization, a significant injury or illness, an obituary of an immediate family member, military duty, incarceration, etc. So we get some unique cases every semester, but generally it's related to an injury and illness or the death of a family member. Every once in a while, we'll get a call from the health center or counseling center verifying, but that is to say that the health center does not hand out sick notes. So don't expect, if a student says they're sick, you can send them to the health center to get services, but they will not be able to get an out-of-class notice from the health center. These are, again, extreme situations where they know that the student cannot attend class because of their injury, typically, or an illness, and they're going to be receiving care elsewhere. That's the only time we hear from the health center. Same thing for counseling. We do not share these documents with anyone, and so it's really important to know, like, part of this process is so faculty don't have to collect the documentation themselves, or you don't have to vet them. We are here to do that for you, and also keep the students' information safe and private. So with an out-of-class notice, a student will contact us by phone or email, or sometimes they walk in, and that has to be made either prior to their absence or during their absence. We cannot do these retroactively. So the student will provide the following documentation. And this is the exact template that we pull from our email. So it says, "I'm sorry to hear you're not well," for example. Please note an out-of-class notice is not an excused absence. You are expected to work with your professor regarding any missed work that might occur during your time away. To set an out-of-class notice, we require documentation like a doctor's note stating you must be absent for 3 or more days. Please send the following over: your name, ID number, documentation, dates of absence, reason for absence. So once the student does this, then we're able to produce an out-of-class notice. It is reviewed by our staff. And this is something John and I were just talking prior to this that is really important because we do truly look at all of the things that come through. Um, my first couple of months in the position, I was a little bit more lenient. I was like, oh, that's a sad story. Maybe we can accept this one. Yeah, it's not this, but your grandma's not, she hasn't passed away, but she's in the hospital. That's so sad. But that's weird, right? Like, what documentation can we request for that? And what we learned, so unfortunately for the student sent a picture of feet in a hospital bed, and unfortunately, it was on page 2 of Google's feet in the hospital bed stock photos. And so it just goes to show you, like, yes, we do take the time to look into all of the requests. We have unfortunately had some students, falsify documentation, pretend like they're, writing fake doctor's notes. But thankfully, we have a good staff that is able to look these things up and verify And so we do this. You don't need to do this as faculty and staff. We can do this and make sure that the student is sending something legitimate. After we do that process, we send an out of class notice through Starfish, through the net to whoever's in the network. So you'll see an out of class notice flag put up by our admin, Natalie Brown. And generally, there's days. Sometimes, if we don't know when they'll return because of whatever the situation might be, it might have an undetermined date to complete. The students are asked to tell us when they return, but many don't. So unfortunately, we don't typically take them down if we haven't heard back from the student, but hopefully you have heard from the student. I also want to mention the students that sometimes don't meet the requirement, but we know that something is going on. So this past year, I've been a little bit more frequent in sending out these messages where it says, I want to reach out to share our office is working with a student as they navigate some challenging things outside of class. And typically, what we're really asking for or looking for is just some grace for that student, some support, just to know that we can verify that they're going through something difficult or heavy, and that typically we're working with them through that. And it might not rise to the level of an out of class notice because there's no documentation available, but it is something that we would like your support in. Our ultimate goal is to get them connected and let them know their options and resources and support them through whatever it is that they might be going through. What does it mean for faculty and staff? So for an out of class notice, like I mentioned, it doesn't obligate you to do anything. It's just a communication tool. We do encourage the students to reach out to you and ask what it is that they might be missing from class or how they can stay on top of their work or make up work if possible. But it is still your policy for your class and how you handle absences of any kind. And so again, our process is that it's a safe and simple way to verify, so you don't have to. And we prefer that you not, just because of the nature of many of the documents that you'll be receiving. So we prefer that you'd send it to us. We also keep it in our system in our database to help kind of get a better picture of the student's experience. If they pop up on our radar in other spaces, we'll know what's going on. And if a student is missing too many classes. So sometimes this does happen where a student might have an out of class notice once, twice, three times, four times. All of a sudden, they seem to be missing a lot of class and it's all verified. I can assure you that our office will talk to that student about excessive absences and the impact on their education. We do also encourage a student to check in with their advisor to make sure that they talk through what their options might be so they can be successful. But I would also encourage you to encourage the student to talk to somebody about what they can do to be successful that semester, because sometimes too many absences are obviously not going to lend them a successful semester, and we want them to be successful. So we you can refer them back to us for their options, whether it might be a medical leave of absence or a university withdrawal, or maybe they have to drop two classes or something to the effect to stay on top of their work but stay enrolled. Um, Again, this is where we can help, the advisors can help, and other folks in their network. And lastly, this is actually a little bit more interactive. I wanted to hear if there's anything we could do to help you with the out of class notice process, if you had any feedback for this process, or if you had any questions. So thanks for listening. Any thoughts or feedback?
I just wanted to clarify when it comes to out of class notices, the students, well, we get the out of class notice. Do the students know that we're getting the out of class notices also?
Yes. Yep. So they get the same note that you do. And Julia's here. I didn't see you in here, Julia. Sorry. Julia's our admin. She's been doing them for a long time too. So
Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm popping in via Zoom.
so the students also know that they're getting the out of class notice, correct? That's what our confirmation is. Yeah.
Correct. Yes, they are informed that we are communicating with their professors and instructors. So they are aware that we are bridging the communication between the individuals.
Yeah, I know that when it comes to out of class notices, students often email me after the fact, inquiring, did you get the out of class notice? Are you aware about this? I'm wondering if that's just a matter of, students being nervous or paranoid that I don't know what's going on, or that they're going to hold, I'm going to hold something against them about this or something like that. Is there anything I can do to make them more calm about this? Should I inform the student when I get an out of class notice that I got the out of class notice?
Yeah, I love that idea actually. I
Mhm.
mean, if you feel like it's something you could handle or manage, if you could say, "Hey, I received this. I hope you're okay." Just wanted to verify that I know. I think that's a good quick message. If you could elaborate on it if you needed to. I do think that that helps. Julia and Natalie, our other frontline folk, they see a lot of anxiety in this process because the students want verification, but also support. So anytime you could reach out,
Absolutely.
that's a great idea. Did I miss anything, Julia?
I don't think so. I honestly think you covered everything,
Okay,
Grace.
good. Any other questions?
And if anyone thinks about any questions afterwards, Dean of Students email is always open. We'd be happy to answer any questions you have, or if you get one and you have some questions too, we are always here to help you through that.
I have a question. Is there like a university policy for, how many times a student can be absent or how many weeks of classes they can miss, or is it up just only like up to the instructor what to do?
Yeah, it's up to the instructor. I know Paul is shaking his head. Unfortunately, there isn't a strict, you missed 20 days or something and you won't have the credit necessary. It is truly up to the instructor's policy. And that's hard because sometimes we'll have a student, we really try to mitigate this in other spaces. So if a student's say noted as not attending, we try to actually get them unenrolled if we see that across the board, for example. And yeah, we to Paul's note, attendance is obligatory. So that's all it says. And that unfortunately leaves it really open. But also, it leaves the student with this choice they have to make sometimes. Am I missing too much class time to be successful? And this is where that advice and advisement really comes into play. So. And we have faculty sometimes that say, you're missing too much time. You won't be able to pass. Like they're very clear and direct about it. And that's always really helpful because sometimes the students don't believe it. They still have that hope that they can turn it around.
I
And
mean, reported like during the semester, like in Starfish, for example.
yep. Yeah, there's an attendance feature on Starfish where you can see how many absences a student has. You can also just leave a note in Starfish. So if you can't, the attendance thing might be associated with the class itself. And so if you wanted to leave a note and say the students missed 3 weeks of class, I don't think they'll be successful. We see a lot of those notes, to be honest with you. And it's helpful for the student and the advisor and anyone else in their network to know.
Okay.
Yep, great question. Yeah, Julia's really been instrumental in helping find those fake letters. So what was it, like the 101 on Healthway
101
Boulevard?
Healthway for Oswego Hospital. If anyone is very familiar with where the hospital is, I used to work for Oswego Health, so I saw that address and I said, something's not right here. So there's been a couple of those here and there.
Yeah.
And we just politely say, unfortunately, we cannot provide an out of class notice for you at the time.
And we usually don't get a pushback on
No.
it. The other thing that's helpful is we have all the same people reviewing them. So we had one student who the letter looked fine and we approved it, but then it came up again the next semester. And then it was the same letter the and we started to realize that the student was using the same letter multiple times. It was a legitimate doctor, but it was not a legitimate reason. So um, we figured that out pretty quick.
I'm really happy that your office does all of that because at one time the academic dean's offices had to do that and it was not, it was among our least favorite things. So very happy that you're doing it on the fifth floor instead.
It's one of my favorite things to vet. I'm not even gonna lie.
Yeah. And like I said, it goes into that care management, case management piece. It gives us a better picture of what the student might be experiencing, and
Yeah,
we're better to leave it with us. So
yeah.
thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at any time if you're suspecting a student might need to get an out of class notice. That's another thing. You can kind of refer them to us because some of them don't know this process. A lot of students don't know that this is a thing until after, and we can't do retroactive. So if you know, if they say I'm going to be out all week, you might say, "Hey, you should probably get an out of class notice for that." Make sure that they've crossed their T's and dotted their I's. We're in it together. Cool. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Julia, for being here.
Of course. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Have a good
Thank
day.
Thanks.
you.
Bye.
Bye.